Today we're going to be looking at what we have right here. If you've read the title of the video, you know what it is. But let's take a little bit of a deeper dive and see what this consists of. This is a repeater that I built for use for my family. It operates on GMRS, but a ham radio repeater would be very similar. So let's take a look and see what we've got here. First off, as we look, the antenna on top is a about 7 foot tall antenna, and it has a gain of about 11 dB. I purchased this online. It seems like, it was somewhere around $80 for that antenna. What it's mounted to is an aluminum flagpole that's 25 foot tall. I picked up this flagpole, I think it's for about $80. It's very light, but it's very stable. So let's go over and take a look at the flagpole. I purchased this off of Amazon, and I know that somebody's going to say, well, you know, that pole is not going to hold up. You're going to have problems the first time you have wind, and it's going to bend and break. You see a lot of reports online of flagpoles not holding up to wind. But let me tell you a little bit about this one. Like I said, it's 25 foot tall. It's made out of aluminum. It's heavy gauge aluminum, and it's sectional. It doesn't come apart. Well, let me rephrase that. It's a sectional antenna. You can see right there that there's where one of the sections goes together. Seems like it's about 4 foot per section. And what else can I tell you about it? It's buried about 18 inches deep. So somebody's going to say, well, that's not deep enough. Well, let me tell you what the footing is of this right here. The pole is set into a hole that was dug approximately 3 foot deep. Then rebar was put into the pole, or into the hole, at varying angles. And then I filled that hole with 500 pounds of concrete. So this pole is not going to go anywhere. The base is not going to go anywhere. All right, so then somebody's going to say, well, it's only 18 inches deep. It's going to break off. It's going to bend under the first wind that you get. You're going to have a problem with it. Well, what I have done, I have filled this pole. If you can hear that, it's not hollow. This pole has been filled with high density structural foam from the bottom all the way to the top. So this pole is very strong, but it is also very light. One person can raise this pole even with the antenna on top, although it does want to get a little top heavy with the antenna. But we have had storms here with winds of up to 70 miles an hour. I live in the South. We do get hurricane and storm force winds regularly, but 70 mile an hour winds, and the pole does flex. It sways back and forth, but it does not bend. It is still perfectly straight. No matter what angle you look at, the pole has not had any problems whatsoever. So I'm very happy with how this turned out, but I don't think I would trust the pole with the antenna on top, although the antenna weighs it's less than 3 pounds, I believe. The structural foam does give it a lot more structural integrity. I could probably take this pole and climb up to the top, and it would wave back and forth, but it would not bend. So it's very strong. If you take the pole out of the ground and try to wave it, it does not really flex. Not much at all. So that's the story on the pole. 25 foot, filled with structural foam. The top of the antenna is somewhere above 30 foot high. So I get pretty good coverage with that. And if I can remember, we'll talk more about the coverage later. So let's look at the box right here. What we have is a white electrical cabinet that I bought online. The cabinet itself I caught on sale is somewhere about 80 bucks. Shipping, including shipping and delivery, all those good things. So I got it while it was on sale. That was a good deal. Ordered online, and fortunately I got a promotional item to go along with this that was worth more than the cabinet itself. But you can see it's mounted to a 4x4, and it's very stable. It does not move at all. Attached to the box there is a 50-watt solar panel. This repeater is completely self-contained and self-powered. There's no external AC running to it at all. The solar panel provides all the power that it needs. It's charging a lithium-ion battery inside that we'll take a look at. But as you can see, the panel is just held on there with some aluminum angle, which has worked very well. One other thing that this does is, somebody may say that, well, you're going to have heat problems with this right here. You know, there's no external openings, although you could put some. There's no external openings for cooling, and you're going to have heat problems with this in the summertime. Well, I put a temperature sensor inside, and the highest that it got was, I think it was about 105 degrees, something like that. That was in full summer. It was in the 90s outside. But one reason that it stays cool is because in the summer, where I live, you get almost straight vertical sunlight. So what happens is the solar panel itself provides shade for the top of the cabinet. And with the cabinet being white, it reflects a lot of the heat. So like I said, I've never had any temperature problems related to sunlight in there at all. So I did add a cooling fan to a unit inside that we'll see in a second, but it was not because of the external temperatures. It was because of the one piece of equipment that I bought to put in here that did not have fans, and it probably should have had fans. It had a heat sink, but the heat sink, it was contained within the box that the equipment was in, so the heat sink itself had no ventilation. So we'll look at that in just a minute. But let's continue looking at the outside here. The cable itself is an LMR 400. I think it's about a 30-foot cable. It goes from the bottom of the cabinet, and I do have lightning protection there. It goes from the bottom of the cabinet up the pole to the antenna, and it's secured along the way with some cable ties. As far as grounding, again, this cabinet is completely isolated because it's 75 foot away from my home. So we've got a ground coming down, and that ground goes to this ground rod right here. There's about 8 inches of the ground rod sticking up. That is a full 8-foot ground rod that was driven into the ground when I had the hole dug for the concrete. So that rod goes 7.5 foot deep and it's grounded with bare copper wire going to the cabinet itself to ground the cabinet. Everything inside the cabinet that has a metal enclosure is also grounded to the cabinet, so there's a common ground for everything that's in there. So I think that covers everything on the outside. So let's look inside. All right, what we have here, we'll start in the top, I guess. This right here is a Retevis repeater. This is what I picked because I got a good deal on it at the time. It was the best deal going. It's made for GMRS, but you can also get repeaters made for the ham frequencies too. So this same setup would work for a ham radio repeater, just like it does for a GMRS repeater. So it was only a 10-watt repeater, and I could get coverage of, depending on the terrain and what was in between me and the repeater, of anywhere from 6 to 13 miles. 13 miles if I was on high ground with a clear line of sight. 6 miles going through trees and buildings and things like that. So the reason I built this repeater was for personal use for myself and my family. So that was the purpose for the whole thing. It handled the coverage in our local area, which was the goal. And I did some upgrades to this that we'll talk about in a second. But anyway, the solar panel charges this lithium ion battery right here. It's a 30 amp hour battery that has met all the needs of the repeater. It hasn't run down on me during the day. So the 50-watt solar panel, along with the 30 amp hour battery, has more than met the needs of the equipment that's running in here, even with fairly good use. So let's keep going here. The solar panels come in and go to this solar panel, solar controller, which takes the power from the solar panel and regulates the charging of the battery, as well as providing power to the equipment itself. So at the time I bought it, I got this on sale. I think it was like $17 for the solar charger controller. The solar panel itself was, I think, $49. So the solar panel and the charge controller were only about $60 combined. The charge controller is wired down to a fuse block, and the battery is also wired to a fuse block. So charging takes place that way. All of the equipment inside is wired to the fuse block, and I've got 3 pieces of equipment in here that we'll talk about. First off, as I said already, we have the repeater itself, which is a very low power repeater. I mean, it basically pulled no current at all. Even when transmitting, it pulled very little current at all in its original condition. One thing I did do was, because of let's talk about that in a little bit. The fuse panel, the fuse block there is also wired, besides the repeater, it's wired to a BTEC amplifier there. It's also wired indirectly to a fan through a 12-volt voltage regulator right here. So what I did was, initially The repeater came with, it says it's a 10-watt repeater, but by the time it went through the duplexer inside, you did well if you got 6 watts out. So what I did, because I needed a little bit more power, was I bought also the duplexer that originally came with the repeater was good for a maximum of 15 watts with a constant power handling ability of 10 watts. So that duplexer was not enough to do what I needed to do. So what I did, I got another duplexer here that you see mounted right here on the side. This duplexer I picked up from BuyTwoWayRadios.com. It's probably the most expensive thing that I bought, but I got it because it fully handles the power that I wanted to do, and it's a much better duplexer. The original duplexer had what I thought was a high insertion loss, about a 3 dB insertion loss, where this, well, and that had to do with because of the frequency bands that the original duplexer was designed for. It was operating at the high end of the frequency band. This duplexer here is made for a different frequency range, or a wider, well, it's not really wider, it's more of a shifted frequency range of about 440 to 512. And this is tuned for I forget what it is exactly. It's neither here nor there. 462 to 467 megahertz. So it handles the signal very good, very low insertion loss, because it's operating in the middle of its frequency range. Seems like the insertion loss on this unit was less than 1 dB on the transmit side, and I don't recall what it was on the receive side, but it was very low, or really it was around 1 dB on transmit and receive. So I was very pleased with that purchase, and I do recommend Buy Two Way Radios, because they'll tune it for you and make sure that it's got your specific frequencies when you buy the repeater at no extra charge. Okay, to get more power, I put in a B-Tech amplifier made for GMRS frequencies. And what this did, this boosted my power from an actual output to the antenna of about 6 watts to, depending on the level of charge of the battery, how much sunlight we have, is the solar panel fully illuminated, and things like that, I get out of this B-Tech amplifier near a full 40 watts on transmit. If the battery is fully charged and the solar panel is fully illuminated, it's pushing 45 watts easily. So I was very happy with that. The only problem that I ran into was if it gets used a lot, this unit would get hot and it would back off the power, so you'd lose power in order to protect itself. And that was because the heat sink that you see right there was enclosed inside the case of the amplifier itself. So the heat sink was getting no ventilation. So that was the reason it was running hot. So what I did was I took and I opened the case, kind of turned everything sideways so it would get ventilation, and I bought a cooling fan. That cooling fan is blowing on the amplifier, and since I did that, I've had no problems with any kind of overheating, even under long use. So again, like I said previously, The cabinet does not get that hot inside. Maybe a little over 100 degrees at the highest. That's all I've ever measured. And I measured it over a period of time during the hottest days of the summer. And the cooling fan right here, picked up off of Amazon, is just a cooling fan that runs up to this voltage regulator to give it a good supply voltage, and then that ties to the fuse panel. This cooling fan keeps the amplifier plenty cool, never had any problems with it, and it all works good. So overall, I'm very happy with the arrangement that I have here. So let's close this up and then we'll continue on. So like I said, I'm very satisfied with this repeater right here. It has served my purposes well. Oh, and since that new amplifier is in there, I get a range of about 13 miles. The amplifier has eliminated the problems that I had with obstructions, be it tall trees, buildings, things like that. But I've got a good radius of 13 to 15 miles. My house and the repeater is located at about 230 feet above sea level. The direction toward town goes slightly downhill. I'm kind of in a, I guess you'd say in a valley, but I'm up on the edge, so I can cover everything from my house down to downtown. So very happy with it. Overall, I would do it again. Now, the one thing that's available now is, instead of having to buy the Retevis repeater, they had a sale going on where you could have 2 radios that would tie together and function as a repeater, and that the 2 radios total were about $299. If that option would have been available when I initially did this, I probably would have got that. But that would have, and those put out a power level of about 40 watts, 45 watts. So there would be no need for an amplifier. You would just need the 2 radios, the duplexer, the battery, and the antenna. That would eliminate the amplifier, the cooling fan, and the wiring that goes to that. You'd have nothing but the radios, the duplexer, the cable out to the antenna. So that's a good option for somebody who's wanting to do something like this, if they can catch the radios on sale. They do put those things on sale. One thing I would say is I would not buy an antenna from Retevis. And if you look online, you can see why, because of their reviews. But as far as their radios go, I'm very happy with the repeater. A person I know that has the 2 radios configured as a repeater setup, that has worked very good for them. They're very satisfied with it. So if the radios are on sale, that's the way to go. If the repeater's on sale, the repeater and the amplifier is the way to go. So it all just depends on what's the deal at the time. But it's definitely worth upgrading. If you get the repeater, it's definitely worth getting an additional duplexer and an amplifier to improve your coverage. So with that, I hope this video has been a help to somebody, provided information. If you got questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll try to answer it. But other than that, see you next video. Not sure what we'll do next, but we'll do something. So thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you like it.